My pants have 4 pockets. One is empty. The other 5 are also empty. So when I was squatting by the roadside stall, slurping down noodles, and the owner asked me cash or card, I scratched my head and asked, "Can I wash dishes?" Seeing that the owner was about to hit me, I quickly took out my last 10 yuan and handed it to him. I'm so poor. I need money. Desperately. So I kidnapped Betsy, the youngest daughter of a real estate tycoon, planning to extort a hefty ransom from her father. At first, I couldn't believe it. I stared at her with wide eyes, holding a newspaper. Are you really Betsy? It says here you're only 15. Her body is so well developed. And how could those long, 1.75-meter legs belong to a minor? Her hands were tied behind the chair. Dude, what year is that newspaper from? She asked. I quickly flipped to the publication date. Oh, 2018. No wonder it smells musty. I counted on my fingers. So you're 20 this year? She rolled her eyes at me. More like almost 20. Still a minor. My heart sank. I nodded in understanding. Then I remembered the purpose of my visit. I picked up a fruit knife and pointed it at her menacingly. Do you know I'm a kidnapper? Give me your phone number or else. Betsy's lips tightened into a line. After a while, she asked, are you asking for a ransom? I slapped her thigh hard. Grown-up stuff. Kids stay out of it. She muttered back, I'm not a kid. I'm an adult. I don't care if you understand or not. I'm in a hurry. Tell me your phone number. Under my impatient urging, she finally mumbled, 1, followed by 10 eights. I carefully dialed the number like it was a precious treasure, only to hear a cold, mechanical voice. The number you have dialed is not in service. Betsy saw my expression as I held the phone, looking like I was constipated, and couldn't help but burst into laughter. My dad doesn't answer calls from strangers. I glared at her. Why didn't you say so earlier? Give me your phone. Betsy looked at me with a troubled expression, then down at herself. How am I supposed to give it to you? I looked at her hands, bound by me. She really couldn't move. So I reached into her pocket to search for it myself. After a while, I still hadn't found it. I looked at Betsy in confusion. Why can't I find it? Betsy's face had turned red from her ears to her neck. In a low voice, she said, you're reaching the wrong place. It took me a while to finally fish out Betsy's phone. I scrolled through her contacts and went straight to her dad's number. After the call connected, a delighted voice came from the other end. Betsy, why did you think of calling your old man? I felt a little embarrassed. I'm not Betsy. My name is Wu. The old man's voice instantly changed. Wu, are you Betsy's boyfriend? I was even more embarrassed. No. Betsy, who was beside me, started laughing again. I was a little exasperated. How could I, a dignified kidnapper, be so lacking in presence? So I cleared my throat. Mr. Liu, listen carefully. I'm a kidnapper. He seemed a little busy and didn't want to deal with me. What kind of boring game is this? Go away, go away. I imitated the way they did it on TV. Don't believe me? I'll make you believe me. I'll send you your daughter's little fingernail first. After I finished speaking, I threatened Betsy with my eyes. She seemed reluctant but still cooperated with a few house and us, pretending to be scared. I immediately followed up. Did you hear that? Send the ransom quickly, or I'll tear up the ticket. There was silence on the other end for a moment, followed by a roar. Marry him. I didn't expect him to say that. I was stunned for a moment and subconsciously looked back at Betsy. She had delicate features and a slender figure. Although it sounded a bit strange, this condition was quite a bargain for me. I smacked my lips and agreed without hesitation. Okay. Betsy slowly raised her head to look at me in disbelief. I hung up the phone directly and strode towards her. She watched as I started to take off my jacket. Her voice trembled slightly. Hey, what are you doing? I sighed heavily and said helplessly, you heard him. That's his request. Betsy's expression froze, as if she was thinking. I didn't bother with her and grabbed her hand tightly. Don't worry, I only want money. I won't hurt you after I get the money. Betsy's lips twitched slightly. Are you sure? I nodded like a chicken pecking at rice. Of course I'm sure. She moved her shoulders, a smile in her eyes. Then she simply relaxed her shoulders. I nodded in satisfaction, ready to continue. Just then, the phone on the side rang. It's my dad, Betsy said. Mr. Liu's anxious voice boomed from the phone. You're not only kidnapping her, but you also want to do unspeakable things to my precious daughter. You bastard. I felt wrong. Isn't that what you suggested? Mr. Liu sounded like he wanted to reach through the phone and punch me. A man with a pure heart sees everything as pure. Forget it. How much? Name your price. I felt like I was being scolded. I looked at Betsy tentatively and said, 10 million. I feel like that's a lucky number. Both father and daughter exclaimed in unison, 10 million. Their tone was filled with disbelief, making me a little unsure. Then, 9 million is fine too. Another 2 seconds of silence. I weakly added, I can't go any lower. Betsy looked hurt. So I'm only worth this much in your heart. Mr. Liu sounded a little offended. Hey, are you looking down on my capabilities, Robert Liu? Oh right, the newspaper did say his name was Robert Liu, the head of a real estate group, a billionaire tycoon. I thought for a moment and asked sincerely, Mr. Liu, how much do you think is appropriate? He said in a powerful and passionate voice, at least. Then he suddenly seemed to remember something and quieted down. 9 million it is. Give me your account number. I rolled my eyes inwardly. This old man, even at his age, still wants to act cool and is reluctant to part with his money. After I sent him my account number via text message, I quickly received a reply. Which bank? I scratched my head. What do you mean which bank? Which bank are you with? The Rural Credit Cooperative of Kaijen Village. After arranging everything, I sat quietly on a small stool stool, waiting for the notification of the money's arrival. Betsy, who was beside me, suddenly spoke. Aren't you afraid that your bank card will expose your information? It was like I had been hit on the head with a stick. I suddenly realized, that's right, my ID card is linked to my bank card. This is basically kidnapping under my real name. Robert would definitely call the police after tracing my identity through the bank, and I would be caught. I grabbed Betsy nervously. What should we do? She looked at me helplessly, but then said, but with my dad's IQ. She stopped mid-sentence. The phone rang again. The caller ID showed Robert's number. Betsy and I looked at each other, a little afraid to answer the call. With Robert's resources, he should have already found out my identity by now. So what was the difference between this call and a death knell? But Betsy motioned for me to answer with her eyes. Her eyes were clear, making me feel inexplicably reassured. I answered the call in a daze. Robert's flustered voice came from the other end. Hey, what kind of card is this? It keeps telling me I've exceeded the transfer limit. I've tried so many times, but I can't transfer it. I slapped my forehead. Oh no, this is the secondary card my school gave me for scholarships. The limit is 10,000. Robert also sounded a little flustered. Then what should we do? Do you have any other cards? I shook my head. No, I don't have any money saved up. Both Robert and I were anxious. Betsy sighed, looking speechless. Idiots. Seeing me pacing back and forth anxiously, she slowly said, actually, I have an idea. My eyes lit up. What is it? He can transfer 10,000 to you every day until it reaches the full amount. I was amazed. As expected of a rich kid, their brain really works better than mine. I immediately told Robert about this method, but he hesitated. But what about my daughter? Is she going to stay out there all this time? I wasn't too concerned about that, but it was indeed a problem. Betsy took the initiative to smooth things over and took the phone to explain things to her father. I don't know what she said, but when Robert's voice came through again, the old man was laughing cheerfully, as if he had just picked up a wad of cash. During the days waiting for the ransom to arrive, I was on edge. On one hand, I had to prevent Betsy from escaping, and on the other hand, I was worried that the police would suddenly come and arrest me. This was my first time kidnapping someone, so I was still scared. Perhaps Betsy sensed my nervousness and tilted her head, asking, what are you thinking about? I lowered my eyes and said, how many years in prison would I get for kidnapping? She froze for a moment, then said slowly, you won't be caught. I knew she was trying to reassure me, afraid that I would lose my temper and hurt her. So I didn't say anything. There was a brief silence in the room. She tried again, asking tentatively, but why did you think of kidnapping me? I answered honestly, I have no money. She slowly shook her head. Why not find a proper job? I rolled my eyes. Then why don't you go to Tsinghua University? Is it because you don't want to? She stared at my face seriously. I'm already in Tsinghua. I was speechless. How frustrating. I simply turned my head away and stopped talking to her. Seeing that I was ignoring her, she started to fidget again. I want to go to the bathroom. Holding it in will be bad. What does that have to do with me? You won't get the money if you go. I stood up from the stool in fright, but then I became worried. What if you run away while you're in the bathroom? She raised an eyebrow. You can watch me. I wasn't some pervert who would do such a thing. After struggling for a while, I still untied her. Try to run, and I'll hit you. She was quite obedient and didn't run. But after she came back from the bathroom, she started complaining again. I want to take a shower. I'll get smelly if I don't. What does that have to do with me? You won't get the money if you shower. I gritted my teeth. How could I, a dignified kidnapper, be so useless? It was infuriating. Betsy stifled a laugh. If you're afraid I'll run, you can watch me too. I froze. That actually sounded like a good idea. The corners of my mouth unconsciously curled up. Betsy noticed the change in my expression and her eyes widened slightly in disbelief. After spending a few days with Betsy, I gradually let down my guard, because I felt that she really had no intention of escaping. There was even one time when I got up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom and heard her sleeping on the small sofa, laughing in her sleep. She seemed quite comfortable. Although life was peaceful, the food in the fridge was not. I looked at the only remaining steamed bun and fell into deep thought. Betsy saw that I hadn't moved for a long time and tilted her head. What's wrong? I turned around and said seriously, I've encountered a very serious problem. She looked a little puzzled. I continued, we've run out of food. If I go out to buy food now, I'll face two dangers. First, you might escape. Second, I might get caught by the police. Let's analyze this comprehensively. Just as I was getting passionate about my meticulous analysis, Betsy raised her hand weakly and said, actually, you can order takeout. At that moment, silence was deafening. I scratched my head. Oh, right. You order then. I don't have any money. Betsy swiped her phone skillfully and placed an order. Half an hour later, the small table was filled with all kinds of calorie bombs. It had been a long time since I had eaten such a sumptuous meal. The first bite of the cupcake, which I used to love, didn't taste delicious but rather too sweet. I didn't dare to eat too much and put it down after eating a dozen or so. Betsy frowned. You're full already. I nodded. Yeah, almost. Can't eat too much, or my mouth will hurt. Betsy's hand, which was reaching for something, froze in midair. She turned her head to look at me very slowly, her eyes filled with emotions I couldn't understand. She pursed her lips and looked at me quietly for a long time before saying in a deliberately casual tone, you've already kidnapped me. Don't be so stingy with yourself when you have money. I shook my head at her and didn't say anything, but I knew very well in my heart that this money had a more important purpose and I couldn't squander it on myself. In the evening, my friend, Chad, called. Didn't you say you were going to make some money? Why did you disappear? I explained, I'm working on it. I'll have it in 2.5 years. I lowered my voice and told him about kidnapping Betsy. His voice was filled with fear. That's illegal. We may not have money, but we have to abide by the law. If you end up in jail, I'll be too embarrassed to visit you. After rambling for a while, he suddenly said, oh right, remember to delete our call history. I didn't know you kidnapped someone. The police shouldn't arrest me, right? I was a little helpless. To be honest, I was also quite scared. But Betsy was a really nice person. She even told me that her father wouldn't call the police. Chad suddenly seemed to have a revelation and became excited. You said that rich kid you kidnapped. This information is too valuable. Let me tell you, you should take advantage of this time and woo her. Once you're in a relationship, you might not get caught. I was shocked. Me, woo Betsy? That's not appropriate, is it? Chad was very excited. What's not appropriate about it? This is your only chance. I was a little overwhelmed, but I trusted Chad very much. Then how should I woo her? With boiling water? Just as I was eagerly asking for advice, the bathroom door behind me suddenly opened. Betsy walked out with her long legs. She was only wearing a bathrobe, her hair still wet. She asked uncertainly as she wiped her hair, "Sorry, did I just hear you say you want to boil me?" I turned my head in horror, almost dropping my phone. Damn it, my only chance was exposed before it even began. I waved my hands frantically. No, 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 I didn't mean it that way. I was so flustered that I almost did a little jig in front of her. Betsy stared at me with amusement. I hurriedly grabbed the rope and was about to tie her up again, but she dodged. She even triumphantly waved my phone in front of me. I backed away cautiously. What are you doing? Did you contact your accomplices and are you planning to escape? She sighed. Why don't you ever believe me? Do you really think I wouldn't have escaped if I wanted to? I looked Betsy up and down, and a bold guess suddenly formed in my mind. I covered my mouth in disbelief. Don't tell me you. Betsy's eyes lit up, and she nodded encouragingly, waiting for me to continue. My jaw almost dropped to the floor. Don't tell me you've been playing the long game, gathering evidence of my crimes, and are planning to work with the police to catch me in one fell swoop. At that moment, Betsy seemed to have turned to stone. She remained motionless in a fixed posture for a long time. I could almost hear the sound of her inhaling sharply. I had already started to pack my things quickly, ready to run. Just as I stealthily reached the door with my small backpack, Betsy slammed the door shut. Then she looked at me with exasperation. Woo, why don't you go take a look in the bathroom first? I almost cried. Don't tell me there's a group of policemen squatting inside, waiting for me to walk in so they can pounce on me. At this moment, it felt like I was the hostage. I didn't dare not to look. I reached out and opened the bathroom door, only to find that the originally empty space was now filled with many things: shower gel, shampoo, facial cleanser, and even high-end looking toilet paper. I was a little confused. Betsy explained helplessly, I saw that you didn't have much in your bathroom, so I ordered some when I ordered takeout. I remained vigilant. Why? She looked at me seriously. So that you can be more comfortable. I still didn't understand. But I kidnapped you. She smiled. But I don't mind. Betsy repeatedly assured me that she wouldn't escape before I got the money. I was still suspicious, but I didn't dare to say anything. After all, judging from her abilities, she could have escaped long ago if she really wanted to. Under her superpower, my small home quickly transformed. Not only were there many new items, but the sofa and bed were also replaced. I was nestled in the beanbag chair, munching on an apple, when I suddenly remembered Betsy. I kidnapped you. What about your studies? She was watering my succulents and looked up when she heard me. It's summer vacation now. When does your semester start? Next month. Do you like school? It's alright. What's Tsinghua University like? It's beautiful. As we chatted, I drifted off to sleep. When I opened my eyes again, Betsy was squatting beside me, gently fanning me with a small fan. Seeing that I was awake, she immediately stood up and turned her back to me, as if trying to hide something. I rubbed my eyes, still drowsy, but seeing her hurriedly grab a rag to wipe the table, I remembered the dream I just had. In my dream, my home was still the same dilapidated place, and I was still the same me, eating steamed buns every day. I suddenly felt a little sad. Betsy, when you go home, will all of this disappear? Her movements froze. Then she said resolutely, no. Betsy turned around and squatted down, pinching my face. If you like it, it will always be here. I blurted out, what about you? She was clearly taken aback for a moment, then she smiled and patted me. I'll be here too. Before the 9 million ransom arrived, I received another call from Chad. Woo, we found a matching donor for Grandpa. The surgery can be scheduled for next week. I was overjoyed. Really? That's great. Chad sounded a little worried. But we need to pay the fee as soon as possible. Have you gathered enough for the surgery? I patted my chest. That's not a problem. Just wait for my good news. After hanging up the phone, I sat by the bed in my room, lost in thought for a long time. Finally, I walked out and pushed Betsy, who was sleeping on the sofa. She was sleeping soundly and didn't react at all. The moonlight shone on her face, like a thin veil. I had no choice but to push her again. She mumbled in her sleep and reached out to grab me, pulling me directly onto the sofa. Then she turned over, hugged me, and rubbed against me. I was tightly wrapped in her embrace, my breathing a little difficult. I could only struggle to free my head. Betsy, I reached out to push her. Let go of me first. Her limbs tightened around me, hugging me even tighter. This kid really doesn't stay still when she sleeps. If she woke up in this position, it would be very awkward. So I didn't dare to struggle too much. Just as I was carefully trying to pry her arms open, I thought I heard her mumble, "Brother Wu."